We turn now to a major case that has dominated the headlines for months now. Jury selection in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs begins tomorrow. And I did want to give you just a little bit of a background on this, as the trial will start tomorrow, beginning with jury selection at a federal courthouse in Manhattan. Testimony.
For coming out really quickly to talk about this. So first, I want you to set the stage. The whole scene out there. You had almost trouble getting into the courthouse today. Talk to us about what you're seeing.
With you, Stephanie.
So this case is going to have a lot of bombshell testimony, no doubt. But I want to start with jury selection that's expected to begin tomorrow. When it comes to what an ideal juror is for the defense and for the prosecution, what are each side looking for a juror?
Oh yeah, I crashed out a little bit this morning, Jesse, thinking I was not about it to get inside that courtroom just because of just how crazy it is. I mean, you can just see the lines just going all the way back with media. It's going all the way back just with the public, just so some people could either, one, watch the trial, get a glimpse of Diddy's family members coming in and outside of the courtroom, and even as well as see as his attorneys, whose members include Brian Steele, Mark Agnifilo, Mark Garagos playing in kind of that defensive advisory type of role. So it's crazy out here, especially, you know, it's Diddy, it's high profile celebrities, it's salacious allegations. Then on top of that, he's facing a lot of time behind bars. So you can understand why so many people of the public wanted to be here and wanted to get here super early so that way they could attend. I even heard somebody was standing in line and was auctioning off how much that they would give to somebody else in line for up to $500, $600.
The world is holding its breath as P. Diddy faces some of the most disturbing allegations of his career. From wild hotel nights to violent threats and sexual abuse claims, the case against Diddy is taking a dark turn. But is this just another celebrity scandal, or is there truth to the horrific allegations? Stay with us as we break down the shocking opening statements of his criminal trial.
Yeah, Stephanie, I think the defense is going to look for people who are open to non-traditional lifestyles, who can receive evidence of what defensible sort of style as sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and not get put off and not rush to judgment. On the flip side, the prosecution is going to be looking for folks who are not going to be distracted by, the new shiny object over here, who are not going to get off course by any kind of circus the Diddy team may try to bring into this trial.
So, I mean, this has garnered much media attention. How does that factor in when it comes to selecting a jury? Because no doubt most people have heard of what is going on.
Totally. So it presents a significant problem. Here's the thing. The judge wants to find jurors who are fair and impartial and who have not already developed an opinion as to Diddy's guilt or innocence. Well, that's hard when every media outlet in the world has covered this case. They've likely already heard about it.
It's a scene that's more like a Hollywood drama than a real courtroom. The courthouse is packed with reporters, curious spectators, and even fans, all hoping to catch a glimpse of Diddy's family members or see the trial unfold. This trial is more than just about criminal charges. It's about the fall of a music mogul who's known for his empire, his fame, and his lifestyle.
And so what the judge is going to have to do is determine how much exposure the potential jurors have had to this Diddy saga, and whether they can put that aside and simply base their verdict on what happens inside that courtroom and not everything that has gone on preceding that.
I also want to ask you this. One of Combs' attorney, and you mentioned this, the lifestyle of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. One of Combs' attorneys had mentioned, my client is not perfect, but everything that was done, was involving consensual adults. There's a lot of evidence, particularly the one with the videotape of Sean Diddy Combs and his then girlfriend, Cassie, showing that he was punching, kicking, and then dragging her inside an LA hotel. How significant is that piece of evidence? The Combs attorneys, they didn't want this to be included. A judge ruled that it could be. So how pivotal is this particular piece of evidence?
With a jury now selected, the question is, who will decide Diddy's fate? The makeup of the jury is diverse, but tensions are high. The defense raised concerns about racial bias during jury selection, and it's clear that the pressure on the jurors will be immense. These 12 individuals will determine whether Diddy walks free or faces serious charges.
Will likely start the following week. The three-time Grammy winner was indicted last September and has been since held in a federal jail in Brooklyn after judges ruled that he would be a threat to intimidate witnesses and victims if released. The 17-page indictment against Combs accuses him of using employees of his business endeavors, including record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits company, a marketing agency, a media company, and television network to facilitate his crimes through acts that included kidnapping, arson, and bribery. If convicted on all charges, which include racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transporting people across state lines to engage in prostitution, Combs faces a possible sentence of decades in prison. I do want to bring in criminal attorney Eric Faddis to speak more on this. And Eric, I appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
The prosecution didn't waste any time. Emily Johnson, a formidable assistant U.S. attorney, painted Diddy as a manipulative criminal who used his power and wealth to control women. From kidnapping allegations to threats of violence, the prosecution's opening statement was filled with shocking accusations. But the most disturbing revelation? The freak-off nights, hotel rooms full of escorts, drugs, and a controlling Diddy.
So that's just a lot of people here. Now, as far as who was inside the courtroom today, still is a lot of famous faces, or well, let me not say famous faces, but a lot of people that we are definitely familiar with here at Law and Crime. You have Mark Garagos in the courtroom, Karen Agnifilo, who is the wife of Mark Agnifilo, who's also representing Luigi as well too. You had Little Rod inside the courtroom today, and he's one who had filed one of the many civil claims against Diddy as well too. He came in probably, I would say, maybe a little like 8:30ish, kind of came in with his sunglasses, 2 chains on, as well as his attorney was inside that courtroom as well too. You have all of Diddy's children, with the exception of his youngest daughter, Love, were inside that courtroom. So that includes Quincy Brown, Justin Combs, Christian Combs, Delilah Combs, Chance Combs, Jesse Combs. Chance's mother was inside that courtroom. Diddy's mother was inside that courtroom. The daughter of Diddy's youngest daughter was inside that courtroom. And then you have the twins' caregiver, who is also best friends with Kim Porter as well too. So a lot of people.
As the trial begins, the faces behind the accusations start to emerge. Cassie Ventura, once Diddy's girlfriend, has been named Victim 1. Her lawsuit reveals allegations of physical violence, blackmail, and coercion. The prosecution painted Yichim a harrowing picture, claiming Diddy controlled every aspect of her life, even using explicit videos to threaten her. And then there's Jane, a woman who alleges Diddy introduced her to the same twisted world of freak-offs.
The video of the Cassie Ventura assault can't be underestimated. So it's clearly inflammatory. Anyone who watches it, it evokes a feeling of, oh my gosh, I feel bad for this person. When we talk about the legal relevance of it, I think it goes more towards the RICO charge and less towards the sex trafficking charge, to show that Diddy engages in violence and threats of violence to silence people, to get his way. But of course, prosecutors will try to weave that video into the sex trafficking charges, as Cassie Ventura is listed as victim number 1 in the sex trafficking count.
So let's talk about those charges, because obviously the prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt some of these charges. You know, what do they have to present to actually indict Combs? Because a lot of this, you know, is perhaps bad behavior, and no doubt his defense team is going to paint it as such. But how does it rise to the level of, let's say, racketeering and all these other charges?
But the defense offers a completely different perspective. According to Diddy's legal team, this trial isn't about trafficking or racketeering. It's about a toxic relationship. They admit Diddy had a temper and used drugs, but they argue that the allegations against him are being blown out of proportion. They argue this case is about personal, private relationships. Nothing more, nothing less. The most shocking part of the prosecution's argument was the so-called Wild King nights. Allegedly orchestrated by Diddy, these were hotel parties filled with escorts, drugs, and lavish.
were inside that courtroom as well, for just opening statements, just to get this jury selected, because it went down from 43 to 18 today. And so a lot of people were inside that courtroom. It was body to body. And what can you expect? It's Diddy's first day of trial. So this was, just a little bit of what we were expecting today, but it's crazy out here.
And I will encourage everybody to check out what you're posting on X, Twitter, because earlier today you actually posted that you saw Rodney Lil Rod Jones, one of the first people to sue Sean Combs. He was outside the courthouse. We were always expecting who would end up showing up during the course of this trial. Talk to us about the jury. Who is this jury? What can you tell about how they're reacting so far to opening statements? I mean, NBC has reported you have one juror who's a 69-year-old male, another juror who's a 31-year-old male, another one 51-year-old male. You have a 42-year-old female, and they have different numbers to them. But what are you determining based on the jury? What's the makeup, and how are they positioning? How are they reacting to the opening statement so far?
The public's reaction to the trial is as divided as ever. Some fans are standing by Diddy, claiming that his lifestyle was private and that these allegations are a result of jealousy and revenge. But others are calling for justice, convinced that the women's stories are real and that Diddy must face the consequences of his actions. Social media is flooded with opposing views, defenders calling it a witch hunt and critics demanding accountability.
Sure. So the first charge is racketeering. That is a law that was really developed to go after mafioso types, to go after crime families. Here, that they're saying that Bad Boy Entertainment was a criminal enterprise and that Diddy engaged in multiple acts of predicate offenses. Those are listed as arson, bribery, kidnapping, that kind of thing. And that all of that was done in relation to and perhaps in furtherance of that criminal enterprise. Second, they are charging 2 counts of human or sex trafficking by fraud, force, or coercion. That's essentially that a commercial sex act was committed by fraud, force, or coercion. The prosecution is going to talk about drugging and that sort of thing. Lastly, they're charging interstate, essentially like an interstate act where Diddy's team recruited a commercial sex worker, helped them transport that person across state lines for a commercial sex act. And so those are really the basics of the elements that the prosecution is going to seek to prove at trial.
It wasn't just Diddy who faced the heat today. His family was in the courtroom, too. His children had to hear about their father's alleged criminal acts, and the weight of that must have been unbearable. The pressure is on Diddy, but it's also on his family, who now must decide how to navigate this media storm. The first witness, Officer Israel Flores, took the stand, recounting his disturbing recollection of an incident in 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel. He testified that he saw Diddy in a towel, with Cassie visibly distressed. Flores claimed that Diddy was calm but seemed to have a devilish stare as he watched Cassie, alone, frightened, and covered in bruises.
We're going to hear from many witnesses, taking the stand. When you take a look at the scope of this trial, with jury selection beginning tomorrow and then likely testimony the following week, how long do you think this trial is going to last?
I think some of the estimates that I've seen seem on the low end. I think this is going for weeks, if not months. This is a very involved indictment. It includes alleged offenses that span almost 2 decades, and there are going to be multiple witnesses and law enforcement investigators and everything under the sun. The jury's going to hear about all of that, and then the defense also has a chance to put on their case. They're going to put on their witnesses and try to establish that, hey, these acts, although they might be unsavory in some folks' eyes, they were not non-consensual. And because of that, they were not criminal acts.
The infamous hotel video from that night is a key piece of evidence. For the first time, the jury got a closer look at what transpired. Cassie's distress was clear, and the surveillance footage showed Diddy's involvement in the assault. This video could be the key to proving the prosecution's case. The defense wasted no time attacking the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses. They cross-examined Officer Flores and even questioned the motives behind the testimonies of Diddy's ex-partners. They claim that these allegations stem from a toxic relationship and that the victims may be exaggerating their experiences for personal gain.
Yeah, well, kind of a hard question to answer, I should say, just because of where I was sitting inside the gallery. It was really hard to kind of see each and every single one of their faces when both sides were presenting opening statements. But what I did see from being inside that gallery was some people jotting notes, some people just very much intently listening to both Emily Johnson for the prosecution as well as Tony Garagos for the defense. But as far as the makeup goes, I kind of just took their jury numbers and compared them to the notes that I took last week when I was here for jury selection. You have one who's a scientist, one whose brother is a security guard. He knew Diddy was arrested, but didn't know the charges. You have one person who's part of a union job. He works for the Department of Correction. Another person who is now retired, but previously used to work at Verizon. You had another person whose friend is a detective, son is a security guard. But, you know, as far as the defense was kind of making their objections today, as far as jury selection goes, and, you know, just kind of the objections they made that, you know, the government was striking 7 black jurors, that type of thing. There were still black jurors that are going to be serving, on this panel who are going to be making making the decisions, going into those deliberations. So from what I saw of the jury makeup as a whole, it really was a diverse group of men and women of all different ages, all different walks of life as well, too.
The trial took an even darker turn with the testimony of Daniel Phillip, a male dancer who alleged he was paid by Cassie to have sex in front of Diddy. Phillip described a disturbing scene where he performed sexual acts while Diddy watched, controlling the entire encounter. The details were graphic, and they sent shockwaves through the courtroom. With every revelation, Diddy's career hangs by a thread. As the details of these wild King nights continue to unfold, the question remains, will Diddy survive this scandal? His reputation has already taken a massive hit, and with the trial continuing, more secrets are likely to come to light.
You know, there's been also a lot of discussion about whether Sean Diddy Combs himself will take the stand. You know, defense teams often shy away from that, even if, you know, someone is very keen on, you know, sharing their perspective, their truth. Do you think that's going to happen, or do you think that he is not going to take the stand?
Yikes. You know, I would absolutely advise him not to take the stand, in part because there's so much impeachment material that he would be confronted with while on the stand. Look at the Cassie video in and of itself. You know, the prosecutor would walk through that in painstaking detail and say, hey, is this you know, kicking your girlfriend in the stomach while she's on the ground? Is this you dragging her by her hair? Don't you understand that that could cause pain to somebody or cause them to be intimidated? Was that part of your design all along? All of these questions could be damning for Diddy, and I doubt that he would take the stand.
With weeks of testimony still ahead, the question on everyone's mind is, what's next for Diddy? Will the evidence against him be enough to secure a conviction, or will his defense team manage to dismantle the case? As the trial continues, all eyes remain on the courtroom. As the trial continues to unfold, the public's opinion is as divided as ever. Some fans refuse to believe the allegations, while others are coming forward to support the victims. This high-profile case has sparked heated debates on social media, with everyone questioning what happens next.
So we hear some commentary in the back right there. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of commentary when it comes to this case. But Elizabeth, you know, we counted up right now. I believe as we're looking into this, we're counting up how many men there are. I believe there's 8 men, 4 women on this jury, all different ages. None of them younger than 30 years old. Take that for what it is. A little bit of older individuals as well. But I think it's really interesting when you talk about what we saw today with opening statements, right? And by the way, just to reiterate something that you mentioned before, the first argument we heard from the defense today was saying that the prosecution, they raised what's called a Batson challenge to their preemptory challenges, saying you're striking jurors based on race, which is improper. The judge didn't side with it. They got a jury selected. Talk about opening statements. I want to start with the prosecution. Emily Johnson, what was the main theme of today? And did you learn something new? And Elizabeth, you're going to have to talk a little bit louder because that guy behind you is incredibly loud. So what was the theme of Emily Johnson's opening statement? And did you learn anything new? Anybody that might testify?
But it's not just Diddy who's affected by these allegations. His children and loved ones are feeling the toll. As they sit in the courtroom, listening to the accusations, the emotional burden is clear. It's a tragic moment for a family caught in the middle of a scandal of this magnitude.
cash for escorts, drugs for both Diddy and the women that were participating in these types of events. Women had to dress in lingerie, had to wear white nails, tall heels, something that Cassie had pointed out in her civil lawsuit that was later settled. Talking about the drug use. Then they went into kind of, the allegations specifically geared towards Cassie and just how, the defendant had met Cassie. They had a 17-year age difference. Cassie was initially given a 10-album deal, and obviously that never happened as far as putting out a whole bunch of different albums and that type of sort. And so these were types of things that we had already known about. I think some of the more interesting points also go to Jane, as far as the other alleged victim. She was a single mom. She met Diddy around 2020 when Diddy was single, when Jane was single, but Diddy was seeing other people. Diddy introduced Jane to the freak offs, and she had tried one just to kind of make him happy, and then just kind of kept going into this repetitive cycle of doing these freak offs, wild hotel nights, that type of sort, just to kind of appease him. That Jane didn't want to do these freak offs, and that she had tried at even one point to hire men on her own that worked in the porn industry so she could pick the men. Diddy made her, these escorts not wear condoms when they, allegedly participated in these types of activities. So, these were just kind of the big things that were pointed out, as far as the government. And Jesse, do you want me to go into the defense? Because the defense was pretty interesting as well, too.
As we approach the final chapters of this trial, the question remains, is this the end of P. Diddy's era? Will the allegations stick, or will his empire survive? One thing is clear. This trial is far from over, and the world is watching. The future of one of the entertainment industry's biggest names is now in the hands of a jury. As the court drama intensifies, every new detail.
Yeah, so, obviously we've been following this case from the beginning, from the time that Cassie had first dropped her civil lawsuits against Diddy. And so a lot of this stuff that we were listening to from Emily Johnson was expected, right? She starts off with saying, this is Sean Combs. He's a cultural icon, a businessman. He's larger than life. But then she went and kind of talked about the defendant's crimes, the defendant being Diddy, that went past 20 years, kidnapping, allegations of arson, allegations of drug trafficking, sex crimes, obstruction.
Adds to the looming question. Will Diddy's name be permanently tarnished by these allegations? The scandal surrounding him continues to unfold, with each revelation adding more weight to the charges. With the defense working tirelessly to undermine the prosecution's case, only time will tell whether Diddy's legendary status in the music and entertainment world will survive this legal battle. The trial has been a true test, not only for Diddy, but for the entire entertainment industry. His name has been scrutinized under the harshest spotlight, and the longer the case drags on, the more speculation swirls about his future. Are held accountable for their actions. If he's acquitted, questions about justice and celebrity privilege will continue to loom large. Regardless of the outcome, this trial has shown us that fame and fortune are no protection from the consequences of one's actions. As the final chapters of this trial unfold, we are left with a question that extends far beyond Diddy's personal fate. Can justice truly be served in an era where celebrity culture often shields those with the most power? This case has brought to light uncomfortable truths about the abuse of power, manipulation, and exploitation. The legacy of this trial will be felt by everyone in the entertainment industry, and it could forever change how we view the intersection of fame and accountability.